The Zephyrian expedition fleet winked into existence on the outskirts of the Sol system, sublight drives flaring brilliant blue as they shed relativistic velocity. Aboard the gleaming silver flagship, Commander Zhaltar stood impassively on the bridge. His four purple eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic display of the system's third planet, a mottled blue-green orb that their long-range scans indicated was the home of the newly discovered species known as humans. Zhaltar clicked his mandibles in irritation. The Zephyrian Galactic Council had deemed it necessary to make contact with these primitives, but he failed to see the point. Humanity was centuries behind the great spacefaring races in technology and culture. What could they possibly offer the galaxy except their obedience and subservience? He turned to his first officer, a lithe female named Salian. Open a channel to the humans' global communications network. It is time they learned their place in the greater scheme of things. On Earth, the sudden appearance of alien ships at the edge of the solar system sparked first panic, then wary fascination. World leaders scrambled to formulate a response, while the scientific community buzzed with excitement and trepidation. Who were these visitors, and what did they want? They did not have to wonder for long. The aliens' message was broadcast across every frequency, overriding all Earth's communications in an overwhelming show of technological superiority. Commander Zhaltar's image coalesced on screens worldwide, an insectoid being with 4 arms and a curtain of writhing antennae where a human would have hair. "People of Earth," the alien began, his voice a grating buzz overlaid with the smooth tones of an electronic translator. "I am Commander Zhaltar of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your species has reached a threshold, your first tentative steps into the wider galaxy. It is time for you to take your rightful place in the interstellar community, as a client race of the Zephyrian, under our protection and guidance. Resist, and you will be crushed. Submit, and together we will usher in a new golden age for your kind." The broadcast ended, leaving a world in turmoil. Some urged cooperation, insisting humanity had no choice but to acquiesce to the aliens' demands. But others pushed back, arguing that human independence was more important than any promises of alien-granted utopia. Fierce debates raged in the halls of power even as the Zephyrian fleet took up positions in orbit, their mile-long battleships casting ominous shadows on the blue globe below. A council of Earth's leaders was hastily convened to decide on a course of action. After days of heated discussion, they settled on a wary compromise. A delegation would be dispatched to meet with the aliens and hear them out, but humanity would not blindly submit. The fundamental rights and freedoms of Earth's people were non-negotiable. Ambassador Lena Sorensen was chosen to lead the human delegation. A veteran diplomat with a shrewd mind and an iron will, she had a reputation for never backing down, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As she strode into the cavernous reception chamber aboard the Zephyrian flagship, her chin was high and her shoulders squared, betraying no hint of fear or trepidation. "Commander Zhaltar," she said coolly as she came face to face with the towering insectoid. "I am Ambassador Lena Sorensen of Earth. We come in peace, and in the hope of fostering a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect between our species." The alien clicked his mandibles in what might have been amusement. "You are in no position to make demands, Ambassador. The Zephyrian offer you a simple choice: submit and thrive, or resist and perish. Our technology is centuries beyond your own. You have no hope of standing against us." Lena met the alien's compound gaze unflinchingly. "On the contrary, Commander, humanity will never submit to tyranny, no matter how technologically advanced it may be. We stand firm in our commitment to our inalienable rights and freedoms. Any relationship between our species must be one of equals, not of master and servant." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a defiance wrapped in an olive branch. There was a long, tense moment of silence. Then, to Lena's surprise, Zhaltar threw back his head and loosed a buzzing, choking sound that could only be laughter. "You have spirit, human. I will grant you that." The alien chuckled. "Very well. If you insist on standing on principle, we will put your vaunted human strength to the test. A contest, then, your champions against ours, in a battle for the future of your species. If you prevail, we will treat with you as equals. The last word dripped with mocking condescension. And if we lose, Lena demanded, then humanity will submit to Zephyrian rule, fully and without conditions. Zhaltar replied, his eyes glinting with predatory anticipation. Either way, we will have our answer as to your proper place in the Galactic Order. Lena's jaw tightened. It was an audacious gamble Zhaltar was proposing, with the fate of humanity riding on the outcome. But it was also, perhaps, the only hope Earth had of avoiding outright conquest and subjugation. And if there was one thing Lena believed in without reservation, it was the indomitable power of the human spirit. Very well, Commander Zhaltar, she said at last, her voice ringing with resolve. In the name of humanity, I accept your challenge. Thus began a countdown to a battle that would decide the fate of an entire species, a battle that would test the mettle of humanity as never before. The stage was set for a pivotal moment in Earth's history, one that would either see it rise to stand tall among the stars, or fall forever beneath the iron talons of Zephyrian tyranny. News of the impending contest between humanity and the Zephyrians spread like wildfire through the galaxy. For the first time in living memory, a primitive species had openly defied the mighty Zephyrian hegemony and been granted a chance to prove their worth on the field of battle. It was unheard of, and it sent shockwaves rippling through the delicate web of alliances and power structures that held the galactic community together. On the Zephyrian homeworld of Xiphos Prime, the reaction was one of outrage and incredulity. The hardliners on the Galactic Council, led by the hawkish Admiral Zorval, seethed at what they saw as Commander Zhaltar's weakness in allowing the humans even a sliver of hope. This is an affront to Zephyrian supremacy, Zorval snarled, slamming a clawed fist on the polished obsidian table of the council chamber. These primitives should have been crushed the moment they dared to defy us. Zhaltar's concession has made us a laughingstock in the eyes of the galaxy. Peace, Admiral, counseled Prime Minister Zalarin, her antennae waving placatingly. Zhaltar's strategy is sound. Let the humans have their contest. When our warriors triumph, as they inevitably will, humanity's spirit will be broken, and they will submit all the more readily to our rule. It is better to conquer through demoralization than destruction. Zorval chittered angrily, but could not argue with the Prime Minister's logic. Very well, he conceded grudgingly. But the battle must be swift and decisive. I want these upstart apes put firmly in their place. No mercy, no quarter. Zhaltar is to unleash the full might of our legions upon them. Is that understood? Zalarin inclined her head. It will be done. Elsewhere in the galaxy, other spacefaring civilizations watched the unfolding drama with a mix of interest and trepidation. For many of the smaller, younger races, humanity's defiance was an inspiration, a glimmer of hope in the face of Zephyrian hegemony. If the humans could stand up to the galaxy's overlords, perhaps they too could aspire to something more than perpetual vassalage. But others, like the ancient and inscrutable Kelenorians, viewed the situation with wary pragmatism. They had seen countless species rise and fall over the millennia, and they knew all too well the dangers of provoking the Zephyrians' wrath. In the Kelenorian capital, two robed figures stood on a balcony overlooking the shimmering spires of the city, their faces hidden beneath deep cowls. The humans court their own destruction, said one, its voice a sibilant whisper. They are like a nova moth, flinging itself into the flame of Zephyrian power. They will burn brightly, but briefly. Perhaps, mused the other, but there is a strength in their audacity, a resilience in their spirit. The Zephyrian may find them more difficult to extinguish than they imagine. As the galaxy held its breath, and the Zephyrian war machine readied itself for the coming battle, on Earth, humanity was girding itself for the fight of its life. The best and brightest from militaries around the world were gathered, forging an elite force that would represent the entirety of the human race on the battlefield. Among the stars, Commander Zhaltar made his own preparations, his compound eyes glinting with anticipated triumph as he surveyed the ranks of his assembled legions, towering Zephyrian warriors clad in gleaming exoskeletons and armed with weapons that could atomize flesh with a single shot. They were the pride of the hegemony, undefeated in countless campaigns across the galaxy. Surely, no primitive species could hope to stand against them. But Zhaltar, for all his arrogance, couldn't help a twinge of unease as he remembered the steel in Ambassador Sorensen's eyes, the unwavering resolve in her voice. The humans, primitive as they were, possessed a spirit unlike any he had encountered before. It was almost admirable in its way. He shook off the thought with a chitter of self-reproach. Admirable or not, the humans would learn their place, as had so many species before them. The Zephyrian did not build their galactic hegemony by bowing to the whims of lesser races. Commander, Zhaltar turned as Salian approached, inclining her head respectfully. The legions are ready. We await your command to begin the assault. Good. Zhaltar's mouthparts curved in a predatory smile. Let us teach these humans the folly of defiance. For the glory of the hegemony. As the Zephyrian fleet set course for the designated battleground, a barren moon in neutral space, the stage was set for a confrontation that would echo through the ages. The mighty Zephyrian legions, the most formidable fighting force in the known galaxy, against the indomitable spirit of humanity. It was a battle for the ages, one that would decide the fate not only of Earth, but of the galactic balance of power itself. The universe held its breath, waiting to see if humanity's audacious gamble would pay off, or if the human race would be just another footnote in the long, bloody history of Zephyrian conquest. The barren, cratered surface of Nexus VI, a lifeless moon chosen as the battleground between humanity and the Zephyrian, trembled under the impact of dozens of landing craft. From the Zephyrian ships poured forth rank after rank of the hegemony's finest warriors, their chitinous armor glinting in the harsh light of the moon's distant sun. They moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine, falling into perfect formation as they assembled their devastating plasma cannons and particle beam rifles. Across the crater-pocked plain, the human force looked woefully small and ill-equipped in comparison. A scant 1,000 soldiers, drawn from the most elite units on Earth, stood in rough lines, checking the charges on their Gauss rifles and railguns. To the Zephyrian, the human weapons looked almost comically primitive, projectile throwers that used chemical propellants and metallic slugs instead of the searing energy beams favored by more advanced races. Commander Zhaltar surveyed the human lines with a mix of amusement and contempt. Did they truly believe they stood a chance against the might of the Zephyrian legions with such archaic armaments? It was almost pitiable. As the Zephyrian commander strode to the front of his assembled troops, his voice boomed out across the comm channels, translated into the crude language of the humans, warriors of Earth. He called out, his tone dripping with condescension. You stand on the precipice of annihilation. But in our beneficence, we offer you one final chance to lay down your arms and submit to the rule of the Zephyrian. Resist, and you will be crushed without mercy. The choice is yours. A lone figure detached itself from the human lines, striding forward to meet Zhaltar's challenge. It was Ambassador Sorensen, her silver hair whipping in the thin wind of the moon's atmosphere, her eyes hard and unyielding. Commander Zhaltar, she called back, her voice steady and clear. Humanity stands united and unafraid. We will never submit to tyranny, no matter the odds. If you want Earth, you'll have to take it over the barrels of our guns. We choose to fight, and we will not back down. A murmur of anger rippled through the Zephyrian ranks at the human's brazen defiance. Zhaltar's mandibles clicked in irritation. So be it, he snarled. Let the battle be joined. For the glory of the Zephyrian hegemony, attack. With a roar that shook the very ground, the Zephyrian legions surged forward, their energy weapons throwing out blasts of blinding light. The human soldiers braced themselves, raising their Gauss rifles and railguns to their shoulders. And then, with a thunderous report that split the thin air, they opened fire. To the utter shock of the Zephyrian, the primitive human projectiles proved devastating. Gauss rounds punched through advanced composite armor like it was paper, sending Zephyrian warriors tumbling to the ground in sprays of ichor. Railgun slugs, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light, tore through energy shields and ripped Zephyrian soldiers in half. The Zephyrian line wavered, then buckled as the human fire took its toll. Plasma cannons and particle beams raked the human positions, vaporizing soldiers where they stood. But for every human that fell, 10 more stepped up to take their place, pouring fire into the faltering Zephyrian ranks. Zaltar watched in disbelief as his warriors, the pride of the hegemony, were driven back by the relentless human assault. How could this be happening? How could primitive ballistic weapons be so effective against Zephyrian armor and shields? It defied all logic, but the humans were not content to simply hold their ground. With a wild battle cry, they surged forward, closing the distance with the Zephyrian lines. And it was there, in the brutal press of close-quarters combat, that the true strength of humanity revealed itself. The Zephyrian, for all their advanced technology, were no match for human soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. The elite human troops, drawn from the ranks of Earth's most legendary units, Navy SEALs, Spetsnaz, SAS, fought with a savage ferocity that stunned the Zephyrian. They used the weight of their armor against them, grappling the larger aliens to the ground and dispatching them with ruthless efficiency. Slowly, inexorably, the tide of battle began to turn. The Zephyrian lines broke, warriors fleeing back to their landing craft in disarray. Zaltar, his armor scorched and dented, could only watch in numb disbelief as his legions, the most feared fighting force in the galaxy, were routed by a primitive race armed with little more than guts and gunpowder. As the last Zephyrian ship fled the moon's orbit, Ambassador Sorensen stood amidst the carnage, her face streaked with sweat and grime, her eyes alight with fierce pride. "Let this be a message to the galaxy," she declared, her voice ringing out across the battlefield. "Humanity will never bow to tyranny. We will fight for our freedom, no matter the odds. And we will win." The battle was over. Against all odds, humanity had triumphed. The Zephyrian had been dealt a blow that would shake the very foundations of their galactic hegemony. But even as the human soldiers celebrated their victory, they knew that this was only the beginning. The Zephyrian would not take this defeat lightly. They would return, with even greater force, determined to crush the upstart race that had dared to defy them. The war for humanity's place in the stars had only just begun. But on this day, on a barren moon far from the green hills of Earth, humanity had shown the galaxy the true strength of the human spirit, indomitable, unyielding, and unafraid. In the wake of humanity's stunning victory over the Zephyrian on Nexus VI, an uneasy silence settled over the galactic community. The hegemony, for so long the undisputed masters of the stars, had been humbled by a primitive race armed with little more than chemical propellant firearms. It was a blow to Zephyrian pride that would not be easily forgotten or forgiven. On the Galactic Council, the repercussions of the battle were felt immediately. The Hardliners, led by Admiral Zorval, were incensed by what they saw as Commander Zaltar's incompetence in allowing the humans to triumph. They demanded swift and brutal retribution, a full-scale invasion of Earth to put the upstart primates in their place once and for all. But others on the council, like the enigmatic Kellenorian representative, urged caution. The humans had proven themselves a formidable foe, and to attack them now, without understanding how they had achieved such a stunning victory, risked even greater humiliation for the Zephyrian. In the end, a compromise was reached. The Council would dispatch a new force to Nexus VI to engage the humans once again. But this time, they would not be bound by the rules of honorable combat. They would employ every weapon in the Zephyrian arsenal to ensure victory, no matter how ruthless or underhanded. And so, under a veil of secrecy, Admiral Zorval and his allies on the Council began to assemble a new kind of army. They reached out to the shadowy arms dealers and black market traders who lurked on the fringes of galactic society, acquiring weapons that were banned by every civilized race in the universe: neuroweapons, mind control devices, and worse. These nightmare devices were loaded onto unmarked ships and dispatched to Nexus VI, where the human forces were still celebrating their victory and preparing for the inevitable Zephyrian counterattack. The humans, believing they would once again be facing the hegemony's conventional forces, were woefully unprepared for the horror that was about to be unleashed upon them. It began with a high-pitched whine that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Human soldiers clutched at their heads, screaming in agony as the neuroweapon's insidious signals warmed their way into their brains, overriding their free will and turning them into helpless puppets. In the darkened holds of the Zephyrian prison ships, the captured human soldiers huddled together in misery and despair. The lingering effects of the neuroweapons had left many of them weakened and disoriented, their minds still reeling from a horrific violation of their free will. But even in their lowest moments, the spark of human defiance refused to be extinguished. Among the prisoners were a handful of scientists and engineers who had been part of the support team on Nexus VI. In the chaos of the Zephyrians' treacherous attack, they had been captured alongside the soldiers. Now, as they sat in the dimly lit confines of their prison cells, their minds turned to the problem of escape and resistance. Dr. Elena Navarro, a brilliant xenotech expert, took the lead. Under her guidance, the human scientists began to study the Zephyrian technology that surrounded them, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited. It was a daunting task. The alien systems were far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. But the scientists were driven by a desperate determination to fight back against their captors. Days turned into weeks as the prison ships plowed through the void of space, carrying their human cargo towards the heart of Zephyrian territory. And in that time, through trial and error and sheer force of will, the human scientists began to make progress. They discovered that the Zephyrians' neuroweapons, for all their horrific effectiveness, operated on a relatively narrow band of electromagnetic frequencies. By studying the salvaged remains of the weapons used against them on Nexus VI, the scientists were able to develop a crude but effective shielding technology that could block the mind-controlling signals. Meanwhile, the soldiers among the prisoners had not been idle. Led by a grizzled Marine sergeant named Jake Hawkins, they had been quietly organizing, gathering intelligence on their captors' routines and defenses. When Dr. Navarro and her team revealed their breakthrough with the neuroweapon shielding, Sergeant Hawkins knew it was time to act. In a daring nighttime raid, the human prisoners overpowered their Zephyrian guards and seized control of one of the prison ships. With Dr. Navarro's jury-rigged shielding protecting them from the aliens' neuroweapons, the humans were able to fight their way to the ship's armory, where they armed themselves with captured Zephyrian plasma rifles. The battle that followed was fierce and bloody as the humans fought their way through the ship, deck by deck, towards the control room. The Zephyrian crew, caught off guard by the suddenness of the human uprising, fought back with all the savagery and skill of their warrior race. But they were no match for the desperate, vengeful fury of the human prisoners. In the end, it was Sergeant Hawkins who burst into the ship's command center, plasma rifle blazing. The Zephyrian captain, a massive, scared brute of a creature, lunged at the human with a roar of rage, only to be cut down in a hail of searing plasma bolts. As the last of the Zephyrian crew fell, the humans let out a ragged cheer of triumph. They had done the impossible. They had seized control of an enemy ship in the heart of Zephyrian space, but their victory was short-lived as the realization of their predicament began to sink in. They were alone, deep in hostile territory, with the full might of the Zephyrian hegemony arrayed against them. They had no hope of fighting their way back to human space. Their only chance was to find a way to strike back at the heart of the enemy and hope that their actions could somehow turn the tide of the war. As Dr. Navarro and Surgeon Hawkins studied the star maps in the ship's navigation system, a desperate plan began to take shape. The Zephyrian homeworld, Xiphos Prime, was heavily defended. But there was one weakness that the humans could exploit. The planet's orbital defense grid was controlled from a single massive space station, a linchpin that, if destroyed, would leave the Zephyrian capital vulnerable to attack. It was a suicide mission, a one-way trip with no hope of return. But for the humans who had endured so much, who had seen their comrades slaughtered and their own minds violated by the Zephyrians' monstrous weapons, it was a chance to strike back, to make their enemy bleed as they had blood. As the captured Zephyrian ship turned its prow towards Xiphos Prime, the human crew steeled themselves for the final, desperate battle to come. They knew that the odds were against them, that they were likely sailing to their own deaths. But they were human. They would not go quietly into the night. They would rage, they would fight. They would make the Zephyrian pay in blood for every inch of the path to their homeworld. And maybe, just maybe, their sacrifice would not be in vain. Maybe their actions would ignite a spark of hope in the hearts of their enslaved brethren, a spark that would flare into the flames of rebellion and resistance across the galaxy. The end was coming, one way or another. And the humans of the prison ship Defiance were determined to meet it on their feet, with weapons in their hands and a battle cry on their lips. They were the last, best hope of humanity, and they would not fail.